Welcome back to Approved Unto God. I'm Joshua Gobitz. We're going to be finishing Ecclesiastes chapter number 9 today, and we're going to be going from verse 11 on to verse number 18. I hope you brought your Bible so you can follow along. I returned. So Solomon just returned from all of this evil under the sun, all of this madness, all of this death that occurs in life, no matter if you're pursuing right or wrong. We're all born sinners and we all go to the grave. We all die. Whatever talents you have, you need to exercise your talents for God, because there's no exercise in those talents when you're in the grave. Now, we know the soul lives forever. We know the soul of those that are saved go to Jesus Christ, to go to be with God in heaven. At this time, when Solomon wrote this, they go to Abraham's bosom in the center of the earth. And then those souls that are damned, they go to the center of the earth also, but they go to hell. And there was a great gulf fixed between the two of those. I returned and saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, neither yet bread to the wise, nor yet riches to men of understanding, nor yet favor to men of skill, but time and chance happeneth to them all. So I'm going to try to break this down. Try to break down this. This is a big verse, this verse 11, and it really does say a lot. So what he's seen under the sun, now we got to remember, this is like not really considering God so much. When he's speaking about what goes on under the sun, he's talking about a life of vanity, a life that's lived without the pursuit of God, without really taking into account that you're going to give an account for all that you do. And he returned and saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift. You know, in the New Testament, Paul talks about a race. He says that I want to run the race, and I want to lay aside every weight and the sin that doth so easily beset us, that we need to be setting those aside and run this race. And it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. It doesn't matter how you started if you finish wrong. God would have us to start right and to finish right. You know, and a lot of people, sadly, in the race of this Christian life are on the sidelines, backslidden or whatever, and all they're doing is criticizing. They used to go to church, but now they criticize the church. They used to have fellowship with believers, but now they just call them hypocrites. And they're just somebody that's watching a race on the sideline, criticizing, but not running themselves. You know, it's tempting sometimes to want to get those people to come to church, and you try to excite them to come back into fellowship. But until they realize their importance to one another as being there for one another and not just criticizing from afar, I don't know if they are coming back, and do we really want them back with that kind of attitude? It's important, the kind of people that's joined to the body of Christ, to your local body. You know, not everybody is a perfect fit. Sometimes we want people to join a church, but we got to realize what their background is. We got to realize, well, do they come from a Pentecostal background? What's their doctrines? What do they believe? Do they believe in salvation properly? Do they believe in speaking in tongues? Are they going to cause problems if they join a church? Are they Calvinists? Are they going to try to indoctrinate people into their bias of Calvinism? Are they going to start trying to teach people things that are contrary to what the Bible really teaches? You know, and they may seem spiritual and all that, and they may be, but are they going to fit right in the local assembly? The stuff you got to consider. You know, we don't just want big churches, we want the right people. It's quality, not quantity. That was a little bit of a rabbit trail. So he saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift, and neither is a Christian race. It doesn't matter how fast you are, just the tortoise and the hare, you know, I think of that. And, you know, the tortoise started off slow, and he kept going, but he was consistent. And then there was the hare that was going really fast, but then maybe he started goofing around and bragging about how fast he was and being funny and waiting for the tortoise. And then somehow he ended up losing it. He ended up losing that race. And I've seen a lot of people start strong in this Christian race but fizzle out. And sometimes I think a lot of preachers, they go to Bible college and they start off strong, and they get a big head from, all that tons of few years of Bible study that they in classes that they took in college, that they think they know everything, and then they give them a church right away at like 22, 23 years old. And the Bible says that you're not supposed to, as a bishop, be a novice, lest being overtaken with pride, you come into the condemnation of the devil. And too many young Christians are thrown into that position. Excuse me, I'm just really kind of stuffed up today, and just kind of bear with me. But these young Christians don't even know anything. They're hardly wet behind the ears. They've hardly cut their teeth on any kind of doctrinal things, any kind of issues in a church. They have no experience in life. They don't know how to counsel. They're just children. They're young 20-year-olds. And they take on a church, and they get a big head, and they end up falling. And they end up, sometimes committing adultery or all kinds of different things that go on, and it's sad because we think just because somebody went to Hiles-Anderson College or whatever college people fancy that they're ready for the ministry, and oftentimes they're not. Why didn't Jesus Christ go into the ministry at 20 years old or 22 years old? Why is it that Christ waited till he was 30 years old? I think that's I think there's a lot of wisdom to that even. And I wanted to be a preacher at a young age, and I thought I was ready, but maybe I wasn't ready. And the Lord had other plans, and he wanted to get me prepared and teach me some life lessons and get me ready for that ministry. And I don't know if I'm ready yet, but you can't feel bad if you're 30 years old and you're not in a full-time ministry yet, because remember that Jesus Christ was still doing the work of a carpenter at 30 years old, and his last 3.5 years was spent in the ministry. Excuse me, I'm just having a hard time here. I don't know how I'm so stuffed up. So Solomon says the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong. And we think that strong people are going to make something of themselves, but sometimes people that are strong or put on a front and show themselves strong are really the weakest people. They're not strong. We see the bikers and stuff with all the tattoos on, and they're trying to compensate for something, and a lot of them lack confidence. A lot of them want to look like they're tough, but they're really not. We're very deceived by our eyes and what we see. A lot of times we think we got things figured out, or we know people because of what we see on the surface, but we don't really know them. And I'm definitely going a different direction than I intended, but that's okay. We'll just let the Spirit guide, the Holy Spirit of God. Neither yet bread to the wise. Now I'm going to get back on track. You know what? We think that people that make bread, people that bring home the bread, people that are successful in this life, who are rich in this world, we think that they're wise. Oftentimes we think, wow, he must be really wise to have the job he has, to be in the position that he's in. He has to be so wise. But oftentimes that's not the case as we read on. Nor yet riches to men of understanding. So we see the successful, we see the rich people of this world, and we automatically assume that they were wise to get to this spot in their life. But sometimes they inherited daddy's riches. Sometimes they knew people that got them in, maybe sports-wise. Sometimes, it's not so much the talent of the individual, but it's more about who they know. But we would think that it's just the wise and the people of understanding that get the riches, but it's not. You've met people, and I've met people that have a lot of money, but they're so stupid. They don't understand anything, and some of them even are Democrats. A lot of them are Democrats, and you think, wow, how did you get to this position of having money, but yet you're a Democrat, and it doesn't really make any sense to you. Because they're not wise and they don't have understanding that you think they have. Maybe they're hard workers, Maybe they didn't have skill. Maybe they just labored hard. Maybe they worked hard to get where they're at. It's not always as it seems, Nor yet favor to men of skill. Not everybody that we think is skillful is skillful. Just because they are where they're at. Skilled trades and all that. I mean, generally speaking, if you got a job in that, you are skilled in it. But oftentimes, time and chance happen to them all. A lot of people get in a place, a position of authority that really have no business probably being there. They may be successful in their life, but they might not be successful in what they're doing. I'm thinking of President Trump and I'm thinking of Joe Biden. I think Trump has been successful. I think he's done a good job as a president, but he's not doing a very good job as a person often. I'm sure a lot of you watched that debate and seen all the interruptions from both of them, predominantly from Trump. And I'm a Trump supporter, but I'm supportive of the Bible and what's right. And I vote for him because he's standing for a lot of what's right, and he's not for murdering babies and for homosexuals, being married and all this stuff. And it's not so much the economy that's going to fix this country and focusing on business, focusing on taxes and money, but it's about righteousness. Righteousness exalteth a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. Our problem is a sin problem. And having a man like Trump, who has a Christian vice president, and Pence, and he has a lot of Christian people advising him, and I don't know whether or not he's really saved or not. I don't know if he really even claims to be. But I'm glad that we have a president that at least honors God, who at least will stand there and hold the Bible. And people could say that's just a ploy or whatever, but he's doing, I think, what's right by God. And I think God's using him for such a time as this, in a time where there's little boldness, where men are effeminate, where men are sissified, where men want to be women and women want to be men. We have a man that's in office who stands up for right, and doesn't matter what people think. It doesn't matter. He's not swayed by the popular opinion. And that's what you need. You need a man in office who has a backbone like a sawed log. And I'm thankful that Trump does have that. But it's funny to me because you think, well, he's in a place, he's the president of the United States, and then Biden was vice president before, and now he's running. But both of them have no wisdom. They both sit there and have bad attitudes, and they badmouth each other. And you think, wow, these are the people that are going to be running, that could be running this great nation. And it's just really sad. It's really sad because I personally think Trump should have just let Biden talk. He would have slit his own throat. You don't have to interrupt him. Just let him talk. If I was him and I was standing up there, I would give short and sweet answers. I wouldn't even take up the full 2 minutes. And I would let Biden take up the full 2 minutes. See, that's wisdom. When a man has a difficult time of speaking, when a man constantly says the wrong stuff and he quotes the wrong numbers and all this, you want him to talk. You don't want to interrupt him. So you think, okay, Solomon says, I return and saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, neither yet bread to the wise, nor yet riches to men of understanding, nor yet favor to men of skill, but time and chance happeneth to them all. And you got to think that sometimes, like, it's by chance that these people are even up there in this position, because there's so many better qualified men to be running. They're there, they're out there, but a lot of them would not want to take on that position. They wouldn't want to do that job, but sometimes that would be the best kind of president, the best kind of person to recruit for that. So I mean, that's kind of a lot just for verse 11, but like, I can't help but relate that to what was going on the other day, and it was just a shame. It's hard to watch. It's just very hard to watch. And we're going to go on and we're going to show how wisdom is better than strength. How wisdom is better than strength. And then we're going to also reiterate on chapter 7 and verse 19. Wisdom strengtheneth the wise more than 10 mighty men which are in the city. Wisdom is where it's at. It's not about the mighty. It's about those that have the wisdom of God. Those who rule well their own spirit are greater than the mighty. And it's hard to put much stock into a president or a man running for president who has no control over his spirit. He's out of control, either one. No respect for one another. Button in. Can't control their mouth. You know, the mouth and the tongue is set on fire of hell. It's a vast iniquity, the things that come out of a man's mouth, you know. And some people are better off listening more than they are talking. And that comes by wisdom. I mean, I've been always a talker. I've always been the one that runs his mouth. But in my older age, I'm learning I need to listen more. There's a lot wiser people than me, and I can learn something if I would just shut up for a second. And the president and Biden, they need to not be past that in their mind. They think nobody's going to teach me. I'm right all the time. They never will own up really even to being wrong about something. How are you ever going to learn? How are you ever going to excel? How are you ever going to get to a higher understanding, a higher level of wisdom, if you cut everybody off that tries to correct you? There's no wisdom in that. For man also knoweth not his time, as the fishes that are taken in the evil net, and as the birds that are caught in the snare. So are the sons of men snared in an evil time, when it falleth upon, or it falleth suddenly upon them. So there's a time that birds and fishes are caught in a snare. They're going about their business as usual, and all of a sudden they're caught, and all of a sudden they're dead. And you know what? That happens to everybody in this life. There is an evil time, and there is a net that can catch us, and we can be caught unawares, just like the birds are, just like the fishes are. And an evil time can catch you if you're not ready for it. That's why the Bible says to walk circumspectly. And it says, be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walketh about as a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. He's looking for those that aren't paying attention. He's looking for those that are not sober-minded, who are not displaying wisdom in every thought, who are not taking into captivity every thought. And he'll take them captive. He'll take them in a snare, just like the fowl, just like the fish. And then you're going to be having to pray, God, get me out of this mess. Get me out of this. I've been caught. I've been trapped. And there's an evil net. There's an internet. And that's a big trap too, and we got to be careful with that. This wisdom have I seen also under the sun, and it seemed great unto me. There was a little city and a few men within it. So listen up, this is great wisdom here, coming from the wisest man. There was a little city and few men within it, and there came a great king against it, and besieged it, and built great bulwarks against it. Now there was found in it a poor wise man, and he by his wisdom delivered the city. Yet no man remembered the same poor man. And oftentimes, the unsung hero is just that. He's unsung. This wise man, he was a poor wise man, is the one who delivered the city, and it doesn't say exactly how he did it, but it wasn't through his strength. It wasn't like the mighty men, who often would be the one who would get the they get player of the game. It's not the Michael Jordan, it's not the Scottie Pippen, but it's like the Steve Kerr. It's that guy that takes a few shots a game, but he was the one that really won the game. It's the defensive guy, and I'm sorry, I was watching The Last Dance, and I don't probably advise it. You be careful watching that because there's some bad language in it. But you see people like Dennis Rodman, and oftentimes it's overlooked the defensive player. It's always about the offensive guy. It's always about, who can score the most points and all this. Those are the guys that make the all-star team. Those are the ones that get all the recognition. It's the mighty men that get all the recognition, the ones that are great in battle. But sadly, the poor wise man is overlooked all the time. The defensive guy is overlooked. The guy who comes in off the bench and it's amazing within maybe 10 or 15 minutes of a game what that person does. And you don't hear much about that person. Excuse me. So there was found in it a poor wise man, and he by wisdom delivered the city. Yet no man remember that same poor man. And it's going to be that way in the life to come. There's going to be those that rule and reign with Christ who were poor, who were wise, but like nobody really paid any attention to them. They could have been a janitor. They could have been just a man of low estate, a carpenter or a plumber or something. But they loved God, and they had the wisdom of God from the Bible, from reading it. And they were yielded to God. And maybe they delivered their family from tragedy. They delivered their kids from being hurt by sin, from drugs, alcohol, all this, because they had wisdom from God. And they were faithful in little, and they were faithful in raising their families right, and they were faithful on the job, and they were faithful to preach the gospel, and faithful to serve God and to yield to God. And you didn't think much of them, but when God sets up his kingdom, those are the ones that are going to shine the brightest. And it's the mighty men that we look at. Oftentimes it's even preachers. We'll look at preachers and think, oh wow, they're going to have such great reward, but they were puffed up. But they were in that position since they were 22 years old, and they were novices when they went in, and they were novices by the time they left the ministry. And sometimes they fell apart because of just that. They were lifted up with pride. Their knowledge puffed them up, but they didn't have any virtue. That you had to have virtue first. You got to add that virtue. And they never took the time to do it. It's not always what we think. We look at it and we think the men that get the most attention because they're pastors or preachers, that they must be the ones who are going to be the rewarded the most. But it's oftentimes the old ladies that are the prayer warriors, the ones that you don't hear much about, but then if you pay attention, they know about everybody's health. They know about so-and-so that's in the hospital, and they'll raise their hand and they'll say, we need to pray for this person. We need to pray for that person. This person's sick. This missionary over here needs help. You know what? And you don't think nothing of them, but those are the ones. Those are the ones that are the wise. Those are the ones that won't get recognition, but God will recognize it. The Pharisees went in with all their money, dropping it in the offering plate, but then the old woman came in with the 2 mites, and Jesus watched it. He paid attention, and maybe the disciples were watching the same thing, but they didn't notice. They didn't see it, and we don't often see it. But he said that she's given more than all of them put together because she gave of her want. And if you give the little talent you got, God is going to reward you greater than you can ever imagine. Then said I, wisdom is better than strength. It sure is. Nevertheless, the poor man's wisdom is despised, and his words are not heard. He's constantly interrupted whenever he wants to speak. People think he has nothing to say, and that's just because they're fools, and that's because they don't listen. Because a wise man's going to listen a lot more than he's going to talk. Because we're given 2 ears, but we're given one mouth, and that ought to tell you something there. So there's a man of wisdom that's not even heard. He's not given any kind of recognition or credit for anything, but God sees it. The words of wise men are heard in quiet more than the cry of him that ruleth among fools. Because God can be found in that quiet place. God hears those cries. God hears the wisdom. God even hears your thoughts. More than the cry of him that ruleth among fools. God's paying more attention to that poor wise man than he is the king who talks like he knows everything, the king who will never take instruction, who's a fool, who is wise in his own conceits. God hears the man that's quiet. God hears the man in the secret place in prayer, or the woman in prayer. Wisdom is better than weapons of war, because I'm going to relate this to the New Testament. The weapons of our warfare are not carnal as the pulling down of strongholds, but they're mighty, and we're facing a spiritual battle that is before us. We fight against wickedness in high places, and that's the prince of the power of the air, that's Satan. And we're in a spiritual warfare. We can't see with our eyes what's before us. We can't see that other dimension, that other world that's here at the same time that we're here. And it's an evil, demonic presence, and there's also angelic beings. There's good angels all around us, and they are battling, and we don't even see it. And we think everything's carnal. We think, oh, if I can only be strong, if I can only be wise. But God said there's a battle that's going on, and you can't even see it. It doesn't take the weapons that you're thinking of. It takes the helmet of, it takes the armor of God to stand against the wiles of the devil. Okay, and this is the last verse here. Wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner destroyeth much good. All it takes is one person to destroy much good. And that's sad. People can work hard. People can use their wisdom to build a mighty work. And then one sinner can destroy much good. One sinner's bad decision can destroy a whole company. One sinner in a church that's divisive can split a whole church. One sinner can spoil much good, destroy much good, And who's the destroyer? That's Satan, And when you're like that, when you're divisive, and when you're the one that's always contentious, you got to be careful, because God hates that type of person. Yea, these 6 things doth the Lord hate, and 7 are an abomination: a proud look, a lying tongue, feet that are swift to shed innocent blood, and I might have missed some, and those that sow discord among the brethren. And it's hard sometimes, because by our human nature we like to talk and we like to discuss